Welcome to your weekly program, Bilahdan, a show with an accent for those without one. You know, since 9/11, the trend now to criminalize Islam and Muslim, and Bush kind of gun-ho about that, invaded 2, 3 different Muslim countries, about 4 million Muslim now been killed since 9/11. And then we have Bush, we have Trump now with Muslim bans. And so the trend to really going after Muslim and a kind of activism in the Muslim community has been under question, especially now the idea or the effort in the White House that to criminalize or designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. It's like what we did with Hamas or Hezbollah and Republican Guard in Iran. So anybody's challenge the Americans, a terrorist organization, the same playbook that our elks and our clients and henchmen in the Middle East, like el-Sisi did that. The biggest challenge to his dictatorship and military dictatorship in the last 7 years is the Brotherhood as an organizer, a community organizer, and getting involved in political activism after Arab Spring. Same thing in Saudi Arabia, been designated as a terrorist organization, Emirates, and all of that. It's not as simple as it sounds. Muslim Brotherhood, there are so many things. They have a long history, 90 years of history, and they've been up and down, and they kind of renounced violence in the 70s, but still been challenged and challenging establishment in the Middle East. So what is the trend? What is behind this movement of designating the Muslim Brotherhood here in the United States as a terrorist organization? What is the legal ramification of this, and how easy or how simple? We have here Bruce Nestor. He is a former president of the National Lawyer Guild. He's been watching this. He's representing some of the people there in Turkey and in Egypt. Welcome to Bilahdan, Bruce.
Thank you.
I've been hearing this quite some time. Why this is getting that much attention right now in the White House?
I think it's really a part of President Trump's base is. And you look at who he personally is. You look at the motivation behind the Muslim ban, the way he speaks about foreign countries, the way he speaks about Islam and Muslims in general. I mean, there's a real segment of a right-wing Christian evangelical base for Trump that believes that we're on the verge of having Sharia law take over the United States. And they don't just say that to like get people excited. I think they truly believe it. And they believe there's this conspiracy and that every Muslim's out there is part of the conspiracy.
We can even have a Sharia law even in a Muslim country.
Well, that doesn't mean it's a real, a reality, but it's an organizing principle for a certain segment of his supporters. And so then you have the Muslim Brotherhood is probably one of the broadest organizations espousing or supporting political Islam, and all its different manifestations in different countries, where it's different country by country. It's changed over history, and it's had all sorts of different expressions. As a result, it has a lot of connections and ties to other organizations in the Muslim world and in the Muslim community in the United States. And so if you could somehow say that the entire Muslim Brotherhood was a terrorist organization, not only would that help your allies in Saudi Arabia and the dictators in Egypt, but it would be a real powerful message, I think, to a segment of the base, which really believes that there's this conspiracy and worldwide effort to subvert Christianity and impose Sharia law on us all.
Whoa.
So I think it serves a domestic political purpose as well as fits really this extreme support we're seeing for Saudi Arabia and Egypt right now.
So let's separate between Brotherhood as an organization, political organization. It's not even a religious organization, it's a political organization.
Correct.
And the members that probably on their own working as an activist for some cause and a different organization. I mean, it seems like you're not going after, as you say, alluded to that, after the Muslim Brotherhood per se. You're going after activism in the Muslim community.
That's really what I think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a long-standing campaign already to try to say that one of Hillary Clinton's aides has a relative who's in the Muslim Brotherhood, therefore, she was infiltrating the Clinton campaign. A lot of this, the most recent effort goes back to a bill introduced by Senator Ted Cruz from Texas in 2017. And he goes through a laundry list of all these different organizations and individuals that he claims are part of the Brotherhood, affiliated with the Brotherhood. And then he goes after, one by one, all of the leading Muslim organizations in the United States, defending civil rights and doing advocacy for the Muslim population within the United States. So he goes after the Council on American Islamic Relations. He goes after a whole bunch of charitable foundations, all in this bill. And that's really part of this view that all Muslims are part of this conspiracy together to subvert Christianity and impose Sharia law upon all of us.
Religious ideology subvert our constitution. You can have that argument.
But what you want to, you can hide what you're doing by creating this enemy that's out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really part of what the evangelical right is trying to do.
I think someone said, and I think the State Department not all on this.
No, I think there's a wide segment of the traditional foreign policy establishment that opposes this, that doesn't see the Muslim, clearly the Muslim Brotherhood is not a terrorist organization. It just simply isn't. It's not organized as one. It's not, doesn't philosophically advocate violence. Even you look at how it expresses itself in different countries. And so I think there's a big part of the traditional foreign policy establishment that thinks that this will really limit the ability of the United States to project diplomatic power, soft power in the Middle East. Yeah. But again, I think it's more this kind of I really think it stems from the same type of anti-Muslim Islamophobia that's behind the travel ban and that's behind the type of things that Trump has said during the campaign and how he describes Somalia and other countries.
Is this
racism, wedded to Islamophobia?
Is this a way of cornering the Democratic Party as a pro-terrorism party? Or how did that happen?
That's certainly one of the fears. For instance,
it was the other way around.
I've reached out to local organizations, saying, well, should we organize around this? Should we talk about this effort? And the one view that's been expressed is that this is really just an effort by the right to bait organizations that defend civil liberties, that defend the right of Muslims to participate in the political process, that it's just trying to bait them into talking about this issue and defending the Brotherhood so that they can then be attacked in turn. Maybe that's a level of kind of political maneuvering that's beyond me. When I see something like this, what I think is clearly wrong, that I think we need to call out. And I think really what it's designed to do, it's designed to have the Red Scare, the witch hunt of the 1950s, but projected onto...
It used to be communism, now it's Islam.
That's right, and projected onto Islam. And to make it utterly impossible to criticize support for the State of Israel, to make it impossible to criticize support for the Saudi monarchy and the war in Yemen, to make it impossible to criticize support for the dictatorship in Egypt. So it's part of an effort to do that, and I think we should stand up and call it out for what it is.
Well, I think we should designate the Republican Party as a hate group.
Well, one of the best responses was from Iran when we designated the Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. Iran designated United States Central Command a terrorist organization for the invasion of Iraq, for the destabilization of Syria, and for the support of Saudi Arabia refueling oil tankers, providing munitions for the war in Yemen, and really, the big picture of this, what lies behind the law to me, is the U.S. claiming a monopoly on the right to use violence. And we always, within a state, we always see that the state tries to claim a monopoly on violence. Yeah. The police are the only ones allowed to use violence. Well, internationally, this is the same thing, that the U.S. can invade, bomb, destroy, subvert, overthrow governments, but we're all doing that because we have the legitimacy to do that. Anybody else that does it is delegitimized as a terrorist. And it can't be seen that inevitably in some conflicts, political conflicts, both sides use violence. I mean, violence is part of the political
somebody
struggle.
was saying wars is the terrorist way for rich, strong country. They use war to terrorize other countries, and poor countries or the people who have no state, they use terrorism as war. So
Right.
we
And
use
that's
war
one
to
of the,
terrorize.
no one, even academics, lawyers,
Yeah.
international law experts try to define terrorism,
terrorism is.
and it's very difficult to do, even as a legal matter, without in turn putting leaders, say in the United States, at risk of being prosecuted because of how they use violence.
It's interesting that the Brotherhood themselves couldn't even stay in power for 1 year in Egypt.
Right.
How can they penetrate the United States with all this institution and all this tradition of democracy and constitution and
Yeah, I mean, one of the first people to introduce this type of bill into the Congress was our own Michelle Bachmann from Minnesota.
Really?
And so again, that's kind of her base, right? Is these right-wing
Does she understand
evangelical.
the Brotherhood history? And
I don't think there's any effort or need to.
Yeah.
The point is you have the belief that your country is being overtaken by a foreign religion and by foreign immigrants, and that it's a conspiracy to subvert the white Christians who built this country. I mean, that's how they see it.
Is this country, that time when the white Christian was building this country, is this what make America great again? Is this what we're talking about? Slavery, white establishment and running the show. Is this really what we are inspired to by bringing that back?
Right. I mean, it's make America great again for certain people who thought it was great at the time, even if it may not have been that great for them. But certainly for the people who benefited from accumulation of wealth from slave labor and Jim Crow. And
so what's the legal ramification? What needs to happen to pass something like that?
So this is something that the president can do on his own, and the law.
There is no oversight.
I believe that Congress has 7 days in which they can review and try to overturn the correct 7 days, and then that the organization itself has a very short period of time. It might be as little as 30 days to try to challenge the designation.
Through the legal system.
That's right. But you're not allowed to see any of the evidence as to why you were designated. But beyond that, the courts are always deferential to the political national security judgment of the president or the executive branch.
What do you mean the court side was
the courts would say that if there's ever a disputed fact or a disputed issue, they'd always resolve that in favor of the president's designation, that's a political judgment, he's allowed to make it. So the real effect of this, though, is that there's a Supreme Court case called Humanitarian Law Project versus Holder, which really defined the broad reach of the material support law, which says that you can't provide material support to a foreign terrorist organization. And
hospital, money.
Money would, like on the biggest level, would think of it buying weapons, right? Or giving money for the purpose of violence.
Obvious.
That's obvious.
But even if you are
medical supplies, or even legal help on how to engage in mediation to try to avoid conflict, or even coordinating your message. So you can be challenged, you could be accused of acting as a media mouthpiece, for instance, if you repeat the same views of a foreign terrorist organization. What that does is, even if it doesn't lead to the prosecution and jailing of people, it expands the investigative power of the government to start going after anybody that talks to, visits,
find something else,
or has ties to the Brotherhood. And we saw that here in the Twin Cities in 2010, when the FBI used the material support foreign terrorist organization law to raid the homes of activists in the Twin Cities and Chicago who had political support for different groups in Palestine or in Colombia. They were never found to have committed a crime, but it certainly scares and intimidates people. It sends a message. Don't have anything to do with trying to criticize the Sisi government, with supporting the main political opposition to the Sisi government, because if you have ties to them, you subject yourself to investigation. You won't get government jobs, you won't get government contracts, you'll be under suspicion, you'll get an FBI file opened on you. And then even if you're a committed individual and you're willing to put up with that, you still live in fear of who can you talk to and what can you say.
So Is this like an aberration? You said this partially motivated by political appeal to the bases, but also there is the overall suspicion of Muslims and Islam, and it's not just the Brotherhood. This is the whole community is under suspicion.
And so I think the effort, this particular effort to make the Muslim Brotherhood a foreign terrorist organization, I think is something of an aberration. It's like kind of the most extreme bigoted elements of Trump and his foreign policy advisors, because people like the New York Times and the Washington Post, which are certainly cheerleaders for U.S. war and intervention abroad, have come out against this. So they see it, I think, as complicating the U.S. ability to project power and to control in a traditional fashion, the Middle East, as well as they're not openly bigoted against Muslims in the United States as long as they're quote unquote loyal.
It's interesting that, and I don't think we hate Muslims because of their beliefs, because of their political views, the challenging the system. When you challenging the war in Iraq or war in Afghanistan, you're challenging supporting dictatorship in Egypt and Saudi Arabia.
They just made the mistake of practicing their religion over our oil.
So the issue is the Islamization of radicalism. But what I'm saying, we love certain kind of Muslims, like Sisi or bin Salman. Those are criminals, mass murderers, who actually doing terrorizing. And their oppressive regimes are the biggest recruiting element of terrorism.
And beyond that, the modern jihadi movement, which evolved into Al-Qaeda and were all created and supported by the United States to weaken the Soviet Union after the 1980 invasion of Afghanistan. And so certainly you're right, there's not a hesitancy on the part of the U.S. foreign policy establishment to support violent dictators who represent, elite Muslim power, right, in certain countries. But to the degree that political Islam talks about mobilizing the masses within Muslim countries where the current power structures are held by a very small group of people through violence and allied with the United States, that's the threat. That Egypt would actually become a democratic country, or that Saudi Arabia, which exists off of Filipino and Pakistani labor, which is, fundamentally undemocratic economically and politically. If any of those countries started to act in their own interest of their own people, rather than the military or the dictators or the United States and the big oil companies, that pose a profound threat to the United States.
And I think that's the main forces behind this is trying to release or relieve Muslim dictators from the challenge that Brotherhood are contributing their own country in Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan and all of that. This is the biggest, most organized political body in those dictators, and I know they are doing it for political gain here, political right. But I think this is really took off very quick after el-Sisi visit last week.
And I think there's a special bond between el-Sisi and Trump, which says a lot about them both. And I think in some sense it could be kind of a gift.
Anyway, thank you so much, Bruce. Bruce Nasser is a former head of National Lawyer Guild, and he is following this business of criminalizing and designating Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization here, and the legal ramification of doing so. We'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum and God bless you all.